I'm criminal defense attorney Joseph Abrams. Today's video is the second in a three-part series in which I explain the federal criminal process in easy-to-understand terms. Last week, in part 1, I discussed the investigation and pretrial phases. Today, in part 2, I discussed the trial phase. Next week, in part 3, I discussed the sentencing phase. So let's talk about the trial phase of the federal criminal process. The trial is the process during which the parties present evidence and arguments to the jury to prove or disprove the charges. One of the first stages in a trial is known as voir dire, which is the process during which members of the community are selected as jurors. During this process, the attorneys may question potential jurors to assess their suitability to serve as jurors. After the jury is selected and seated, the parties present their opening arguments, with the government presenting their opening argument first. After opening arguments are completed, the government presents their case in chief, during which they try to prove the defendant's guilt through physical evidence and witness testimony. After the government completes its case, the defendant presents their case in chief. Also, the defendant may choose to testify on his own behalf, but under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution is not required to do so, and usually does not do so. After the defense rests their case, and because the government has the burden of proof, the government is entitled to present a rebuttal against any evidence presented by the defendant during their case in chief. After the government completes its rebuttal case, the parties present their closing arguments, with the government going first, followed by the defense. However, again, because the government has the burden of proof, they are entitled to a final closing rebuttal argument. Following closing arguments, the judge instructs the jury on the relevant law to apply. The jury then retires to deliberate and decide the case. When the jury has reached its decision, it returns to the courtroom and announces the verdict. For the government to win the case, the jury's guilty verdict must be unanimous. For the defendant to be acquitted, the jury's not guilty verdict must also be unanimous. Any other outcome results in a mistrial or a hung jury, after which the government can choose either to retry the case or drop the case. This has been criminal defense attorney Joseph Abrams. Thank you for watching and listening. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you next time in the final installment of this three-part series when we discuss the sentencing phase of the federal criminal process.